The bye week couldn't come fast enough, Badger fans, as well as all is not well in Madtown. How do we fix it? What will it take to get back to the top of the conference? And where do we go from here? We do our bye week big picture overview and discuss that and more today on the Bucky Report.
Welcome to the Bucky Report, your destination for all things Wisconsin Badgers. Authentic takes.
Oh my God.
Game analysis.
Touchdown Badgers! Ring one up!
And discussion from the fan perspective.
Woo-hoo!
Thanks for joining us and on Wisconsin.
What is up, everybody? Happy Sunday. We're in the middle of football right now, so I know a lot of people are probably watching some NFL. Joined today by the great Ryan Harings. I am not going to throw up the sound clip because I embarrass him.
It's too much. It is way too much.
But, all right, so it's the bye week. I wanted to dive into a big picture review of kind of the program as a whole. Where do we look at this as a university and kind of take a look and see, like, what are we all doing wrong and what can we do to fix it going forward? And I think it's really important that we kind of be honest with ourselves with what's happening with this school right now, because clearly I think even I'll freely admit I glossed over some things that are probably bigger issues than what we've anticipated that they actually are. And we really need to dive into this and kind of get a feel for how do you fix this? So,
yeah. That's a good
right. I know you've been talking about it now for, how many weeks probably on your show. Number one, before we dive into this, for Rajiv, for all of you that follow his picks, just wanted to let everybody know he is, I think this is correct. Yeah. 2-2 last week. He said he is 3-1, I think, this week.
I think he's 3-1 this week, which I mean, against this all against the spread too. No money line garbage.
Yep.
He's basically crushing it.
Yeah, he's doing a great job so far. I mean, it's really hard to consistently pick winners, and he's done a pretty dynamite job of it so far.
Yep.
But yeah, honestly, guys, diving into this, I wanted to start taking a look at this from the perspective of, if we take a look at the school, what do we need to do to kind of figure out, where do we start? Do we look at this? So I got 3 categories I wanted to jump into today. Number 1, coaching. Number 2, administrative, meaning the university as a whole. And number 3, players or roster. And I wanted to go into those 3 areas to kind of, really look at this, because it's not as simple as just like we need more talent. I think that's a very weak argument to make without really truly doing a deep dive and really understanding what you have in terms of players. And I think that there is talent on this roster, and I think we're just completely underdeveloping and underutilizing it, which has been a huge factor. So the first thing I wanted to dive into was coaching. And Ryan, I kind of brought you up to speed on this a little bit before we got started, but the first question I had for you was, is this the right staff?
I mean, it probably not, if we're going to be dead honest. Yeah, the right staff doesn't mean every single piece of this staff isn't good enough. But I don't know how you can look at the results on the field and say this is the right staff. There's massive issues with certain parts of this program right now. And the staff ultimately is responsible for all of that, right?
Yeah, and I think you need to look at this from the perspective of, you can't just sit here and pick and choose who you're going to take out. Like, if you're not going to replace Luke Fickell and just expect certain other pieces of the staff to stay, or replace a bunch of pieces of the staff and expect Fickell to be okay with that. Basically, I mean, you can pick and choose if you want, but the reality is likely probably going to have to flush this staff if you wanted to. If you're being truly honest with yourself and saying, if we're setting Wisconsin up for the greatest level of success or best foot forward to move forward, you're probably going to say, unfortunately, you'd have to clear the staff. And as much as there are pieces that I like, I'm a huge fan of Reed at wide receiver coach. I think he's done an incredible job recruiting. And I think that the receivers honestly look better than they have in previous years. And maybe that's just some of the talent we've had assembled in general, but I think they've looked pretty good. I don't think the receivers have truly been a problem with what we've seen so far. Now we can talk about the ball distribution and the ability to get it to him, but I think he's done a good job developing that group.
So really for you, this comes down to a Luke Fickell question, right? It is when we talk about is this the right staff, it's really is Luke Fickell the right head coach?
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think if you're removing Fickell, you're effectively removing everyone else. Like there might be somebody that gets kept, and that would be simply because whoever you bring in doesn't have that position filled, and is like, okay, I like this guy, I'll interview him, I'll give him a shot.
So I to be consistent with what I've said in my show is I'm still not fully out on this, and it's partially because of a point I've made going back to the beginning of last. Like I think you have to give coaches 3 to 4 years. I really think, barring some type of just absolute insanity off the field, like you remember that coach that got hired and then like a week later drove to the drive-through drunk and naked. Yeah, you're gonna get fired for that. That's a problem, guy.
Or who was the one that went? Yeah, is that the one that went down to Arizona State too, or is that Graham?
I think so. Yeah. Like a week after he got hired, he drove naked, drunk through a drive-through. You're going to get fired for that. So my biggest issue here is it's some of the logistics of it. Like just the reality of having to get rid of a head coach is not as simple as I think we've talked about the buyout a lot, but it's not just a buyout. You're going to have to recycle through the roster. You're going to have to refill the recruiting department. You're going to have to refill a lot of things if you want to cycle head coach. And it's really easy to get stuck in a cycle where if you're only giving coaches 3 years, you only give the next guy 3 years. And if he doesn't work out, you're never going to get out of that cycle. So a lot of where I'm at, and I know this is not the most popular opinion, but if I move on from a coach who we thought at the time was a really good hire, right? We thought Luke Fickell was a really good hire. I want to be 100% sure he can't be the guy before I pull the plug.
So I can understand your argument on that. And my pushback would simply be, I would say you get 4 years if there's a baseline of success and some level of growth to prove that it's warranted. Realistically, there's a chance that we actually have regressed 3 consecutive years, going through this year. There's a very real chance that this could be a 2-10 team, and you're showing a return of 7-5 or 7-6, 5-7, and now looking at potentially 2-10 if we can't figure it out.
5-7 would feel like a good year at this point if we got back to that.
No kidding. And that's where I look at it and I'm like, well, I think, yes, you look at it if you feel like you're muscling your way through the tough time to get to the better. We need to see something here. Like you need the offensive line to start to look better. You need the secondary to start to come together for this to be like, okay, are you just lost and can't figure this out and nothing is growing? Or is this a matter of we just needed to kind of hit bottom to move up?
I think for me, and again, just to be consistent with things I've said, I also the rest of this year is a big deal to me. I really need to see how they come out against Michigan after the bye week, because if this continues this trend where what you see at Maryland against Maryland, not at Maryland, in Madison against Maryland, if you see that level the rest of the year, then you got to move on. Okay. When I say you should get 3 or 4 years, like we're not even through year 3. Like we need to see, I think, how he responds to this game, how he responds against Michigan, how he finishes this year out. And then if this is more the same, even if you finish 3-9, but this is the level of play you get, then I think you do have to pull the plug. I'm with you, but I do want to see, before I say I'm definitely out, I want to see how they respond to major adversity in season. I want to see how they finish this year out, because there is a chance that he figures something out, and in which case you don't want to be all out right now and then have to reverse direction. I just want to see how this year finishes out.
So taking that and sitting on that now to move beyond Fickell, what positions have we seen, or what areas do we see shortcomings? Do we think we need to move, make changes if that's the case? Like if you're going to keep Fickell, where are we underperforming, and where do we need to make changes for this staff? Because I look at it. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Yeah, finish. Yeah.
I look at it and I'd say right now there's a bullseye on probably Blazek, probably Mitchell, probably Haynes. I think tight end has shown some growth. I legitimately feel like Steck looks like he's going to be a piece in a couple of years, or maybe probably next year already. But those 3 positions, I look at that and I feel like those are massive shortcomings on this team right now. The secondary is a train wreck. The offensive line, I get it. The guys are young, they are physically developed enough that they should at least have a baseline of being like understanding of what there is. And I don't think that Grimes has helped them. Like some of the play calling has been horrible so far. I think that what's happening with the staff is you're trying to make like lobster and steak out of gruel right now. And it's just like, you're going to have to grind these guys a little bit in order to make them better. And that might mean we have some ugly drives, but you stay simple with them so that they can get their legs under them and get better rather than trying to get fancy and just squeezing, blood from a stone. Like it's not working. When you try to get fancy with this, you have guys whose heads are spinning already and you're making it even worse on them. And I think you need to figure out a way to get around that.
Yeah, you and I are on the same page with the over complex. Again, I understand what Grimes is trying to do, but you can't do that with guys that are playing a bunch of new positions on the offensive line, a backup quarterback, new players everywhere. Dude, it doesn't work. You got to simplify. I think Blazek for sure, right? You can't look at this offensive line, injuries or not. And the one thing I've said on my show too is enough of they're just too young. Eventually in season, because you and I have been talking about this for a while, eventually in season, young guys have to start playing better. You can't say he's too young for the entire year because now you've had multiple games. You're going to be having a bye week. We need to start seeing progress there, man. Otherwise,
because we talented guys.
That's what I'm saying. We both like Mandel. We like, Brunner is a 3-year guy. Malman's been here for 4 years, 5 years. You have,
and they've regressed.
And they look worse, right? So I think Blazek for sure. There's underperformance everywhere. Special teams, that's Mitchell, right? You look at some of the block kicks. You look at Ricardo Holman, Paul Haynes' group. Now, Emilio Agard's a guy who spoke really highly about Paul Haynes when I talked to him. But, dude, Ricardo Holman has regressed massively. He looks borderline unplayable at this point, and our secondary has been shredded. So I think you could almost point to just about everyone except for I like Whitlow. I like the job he seems to have done. This defensive line looks better. He's gotten progress out of some guys that have returned. Reed, I can hear you on. Guyton for his recruiting chops. What about running backs? Do running backs look like they developed from last year? I know the offensive line's been a big issue, but
it's so hard to tell. That's the thing is like, and I agree with you. They're certainly not playing up to their recruiting pedigree. I think there's been times where we've talked about the vision's not always there. They are young, but I expect more. I would expect more from what we've seen. Last game was the first one against Maryland was the first time I looked at them and I was like, you guys, this running game is awful because we had the numbers were not horrible in the first 3 games in terms of the running backs. Like they were averaging mid-4s per rush. They were terrible against Maryland. And that is a combination of inability to see anything that was there or make something happen, as well as terrible offensive line play.
It feels like the running backs right now are getting basically exactly what's blocked and nothing more. And occasionally you need a running back to get
sometimes less
bounced outside. Like you don't need Jonathan Taylor, and that's what everyone says. Well, yeah, but dude, can you get Corey Clement? Can you get something where they're getting a little bit more than the offensive line is giving you? And it feels like they just get what the offensive line gives them, which is in a lot of cases not much, but they have to play better too. So I think, dude, you look at this team and the spots that are performing up to expectations, there's like 1 or 2 of them, and everything else is underperformed. So target on everybody's back.
From Greg Linscomb, was Maryland game a hangover from Bama or is it systemic? I don't think it was a hangover. And there shouldn't be. Like this team is way too much under the gun right now for that to be an excuse. Because with what the issues were last season in terms of having massive issues with Iowa after playing, or what was it, after Penn State or was that after Oregon? That was after Oregon, right?
That was after Oregon.
Yeah. That game was horrific. We saw Minnesota, there was a hangover and that team just didn't show up. Like you can't have that anymore. Like that, unfortunately, that's where we're at with Fickell at this point, where you have to look at it as this is just what his team is. Like, I don't view that as a hangover. In college football, you should never have a hangover. Number one, you don't play enough games for that to be something that's acceptable. And good teams don't have hangovers. Good teams get the job done. But I look at it, and I don't know how you feel about it, but there's no reason with how tough this schedule is that you should ever come into a game against Maryland where you feel like you have a good chance at a win if you play well and have that type of effort.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I don't think it's a hangover. Well, I'll say two things to this point. And Greg, obviously a good friend of both shows, and we've met him in person. Great dude. Two things I would say. The first is if it is a hangover, that's on the coaches. That is a culture problem, and that's an issue. If it's systemic, which I believe it is, like because you look at what happened in the Maryland game, slow start. That's been a hallmark of Fickell's career. That's systemic. Offensive line problems. That's been systemic throughout Luke Fickell's career. Offense struggling. That's been systemic. Silly mistakes in moments where you can't have them. Again, that's been systemic. All these things have been hallmarks of this Luke Fickell tenure. So I don't think it was a hangover either. I think the problems are deeper than that. And in a lot of ways, Justin, it's better if it is a hangover because you can fix that easier. You can get after the ass of some players. Like, all right, you're done. But if it's systemic, man, those roots grow deeper and it's harder to pull out. So unfortunately, I think it's systemic, and that makes it more difficult to fix.
From Bill Woj here, the D line looks better because of the portal, not coaching. I disagree with that. I think Barton's been better this year than he was last year. He really struggled last season, and I think that he has shown true growth. I will also say that Whitlow, out of the coaches that we have, I think is a good coach. Like, he legitimately at every stop he has been at has reformed those defensive line groups, and he typically ends up with all conference guys at every stop. And that to me is a hallmark of a coach that is capable of coming in and developing players. Yeah.
And the one thing I'd add onto this too, and Bill Woj, another good dude, is part of a coach's job is to find the people in the portal that can make you better too. We've had so many misses in the portal. You go look at linebackers, quarterbacks, like so many spots. Well, Whitlow played a big role in identifying and finding the people in the portal that fit into this. He's also a former service academy guy. Like, those dudes don't suffer fools. Like, I think it was Air Force, I believe. So, I mean, Air Force isn't quite the Navy, but it is what it is. So I like Whitlow a lot, actually. I think he's a no-nonsense guy. He helped identify the guys in the portal that came in and were fits, unlike other spots on this team where he brought in portal guys that's like, this dude can't play here. What the hell are we doing? So I'm high on Whitlow. I agree with you on Reed as well. I like both those coaches quite a bit still.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we'd agree that there's certainly some level of disruption that's going to happen with that staff. If he's going to be here next year, there's probably 3 to 4 guys that are going to be switched in order for us to make this, to give him another year. And he has got to make some home run hits. Go ahead. What's up?
Let me ask you one thing on that. So something Rajiv and I have talked about, I think we've talked about as well. Could he actually let another offensive line coach go? I mean, and the reason for that is there's only so many times you can cycle a position before people start pointing the finger at you.
I think it's already pointing at him. But if he does get rid of Blazek, then you better figure out who's capable of actually doing the job. Like, you cannot afford to have somebody that comes in and doesn't hit the ground running at that position. And I know that position is tough. I know there's a lot of technique associated with it. Wisconsin offensive line play has been bad since the last time we saw it was a decent offensive line was under Jonathan Taylor. Like, if you look at the rushing numbers since he's left Wisconsin, it's taken a massive step back.
That would have been a Joe Rudolph line, right? That was Rudolph coaching the O-line.
Probably Rudolph, yeah. I think Rudolph is at least a good offensive line coach. Like, he may not be great. He might not be somebody who's going to put together, the offensive line that's going to win the National Offensive Line Awards. But I think he's capable of getting you to a functioning running game. He's above average at being able to set up the run game in college football.
Let me ask you the obvious follow-up question to that, or at least the obvious one that pops into my head. So Rudolph was coaching with Jonathan Taylor in the backfield against a schedule that was far, far worse than this. Yeah. What would Jonathan Taylor look like with this offensive line in this schedule?
He's probably 1,100 yard back, something like that. Like, the production would be hamstrung mightily by the inability to create holes. And Taylor probably would have created some. You still would have seen some occasional magic from him, but the poor blocking would have been a problem.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And the reason I bring that up is that I think some people are going to say, well, it's because we're playing a harder team and we don't have a great running back. It's not just that. The offensive line is legitimately really bad right now. And for people who still think this is just a function of, I'm just going to push back really heavily against people who think it's only a function of the schedule's really hard and we're playing young guys. There's young guys playing on a lot of teams that look better than this right now.
That year that we started 4 redshirt freshmen or 3 for most of the year, it still was better running the football than what we were now. And that was with Clement that was banged up, and with Ogbonwale, I believe, as the backup.
How'd you pronounce his name?
Sorry, Ogbonwale.
There you go. The first one was weird. You added like 2 N's in there.
It took me a second to get that name to pop back in my head. It's been a while since I've had to say it. Oh, I love him.
Underrated.
Yeah. So I think I look at this and it's pretty clear. Like, we're in year 2 of Blazek, and I'm not seeing substantial. Like, I get that you change schemes. I don't believe that was such a huge change that these guys shouldn't be at least functional. And it does not feel like we're functional. And we're seeing far too many mental errors. Like, at some point, you need to figure out a way to make this simple for these guys so that we're capable of being at least competent. And we are not competent right now.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Let's jump into the next one here. The next question I had was, how do you fix the coaching? Like, we talked a little bit about it. We're probably going to have some – there's probably just going to have to be some changes here. Like, if you're going to keep Grimes as your offensive coordinator, number one, I do think the Maryland game, he's clearly got to settle down a little bit with the play calling. I understand you want to have some flashes of stuff. There's no point in being overly complex when you're not working and when things aren't working as they are. To me, it's like throwing gas on a fire. Like, somebody's already not working well. You're making stuff that's plays that are likely for massive negative plays. And that's when I see things like the wide receiver throw and stuff like that, I'm looking at it and I'm like, there's so much that can go wrong in this play. You have, number one, you have a guy throwing who is not used to throwing into coverage, who, like, the second he got that ball, you and I were screaming when we were watching the game, like, just throw it out of bounds. It's not there. There are 2 defenders on that play, and he almost threw it to the safety. And it's like, man, it feels like people have really, really scouted Grimes well in his inception into the Big Ten. Because the flash is not like he's not getting very many plays where it feels like the defense is biting on anything. And maybe that's because we're not beating them with anything else. So there's nothing that they really truly have to honor. And so it's easy for them to just attack.
I think it all goes back to the O-line, honestly. Like, I think it really all goes back to the O-line just not being a functional unit. And because of that, Grimes can't do what he wants. The quarterbacks can't stay upright. You can't run the ball.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, I think we have all these parts in our, like, a mechanic shop, right? Where we really like the tires and we like this, gosh, I'm not a car person, this carburetor. I don't know. We got all these parts we like.
We're feeling good. All right.
Yeah, this engine just isn't working. So none of the other parts matter. You can't move forward without that. So I didn't love what Grimes did against Maryland, like we talked about it. You can't go overly gimmicky, because once you run a couple gimmick plays, the defense knows that's what you're trying to do, and then they're on high alert, right? The point of those plays is to catch them off guard. If you keep doing it, they're not going to get caught off guard. But I also think he was a little incorrect on this, but I think he felt forced into a corner. It's like, listen, nothing else we do gains yards, so we're going to try to throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. I think you went overboard there, clearly, but I think it's because the offensive line just can't pass block. They can't run block. They're getting penalties. They're moving in the wrong direction. Maryland started 2 freshman defensive linemen in that game, and we got overwhelmed. So I think he's just backed in a corner, man.
Do you think, and this has been my perspective, you take the pain to get to the positive? And I think that's what you needed in that game, was like, you were going to have some drives that were really ugly drives, just running your base stuff and hoping that by the end of the game, you're at least functional in those areas, rather than just giving up on them and trying to move to gimmick plays and stuff like that off of it. Because I do think, like, I would love to see us just run the ball 3 straight times in a drive and just be like, all right, we're gonna do this until we get it right. And that's honestly how I feel about the offense. I don't care. I said it when we were talking about it. Run 10 plays in practice and keep running them until they're run to perfection. Because right now we can't find anything to hang our hat on offensively. That's got to change. Like, you've got to find at least, your 5 or 6 money plays, and money plays can be, and from the run game, that can be as simple as 3-4 yards. Like, we're going to get 3 or 4 yards almost every time we run this play.
I hear you. Like, you and I agree on this for the most part. I think they need to simplify and get better at the simple things. But I also think if you want to very strictly apply that logic, there's going to be drives where you run 3 straight times to get 1 yard.
I know.
And people people are going to be frustrated by that too, right?
We're already frustrated, but you might see more growth with my point on it.
It's possible. Here I guess here's my bigger point is if that's where we are, and I think that is where we are, I don't think that's an unfair take at all. Listen, Big Ten defenses are too good if you only run 10 plays.
Yeah.
So probably. That's not going to work either. Now what we're also doing doesn't work, right? So I hear you on that. I think it again comes back to the fact that the offensive line, without a functional offensive line, it doesn't matter. None of it matters unless the offensive line gets better.
From Greg yet again, Ryan, just don't put a colander in your.
Yeah, I know that word now because of this show.
It just took 2 years. Ryan knows what he's going to use when he's making spaghetti.
Colander, a strainer thingy. Yeah,
strainer, colander, same thing.
You asked how do the coaches get better? I think this is again probably an unpopular take. I think there is an element of they get better just by you not firing everybody. And next year, these redshirt freshmen are redshirt sophomores, and you have quarterback health and an easier schedule. And the coaches will just look better because of that. Unpopular take, but that could be how they get better. The young players mature and the schedule gets easier. And then suddenly the coaches look better.
My perspective on this, and it's probably not a valid excuse for college football because I think it's really tough to do this, is I've watched a few things online, and one of the things I've heard from a business standpoint is learn to fire quickly. Mm-hmm. If somebody's not working, don't let your ego get in the way. Realize it's not working and move on. And that's kind of what I feel like at this point when you look at certain positions where it's like, yeah, I'm not seeing what I expect for my baseline. Like, this is not what's acceptable to me as the minimum. So I need to move on from this and find somebody that is capable of providing that. So I feel like that's where I'm kind of at with the staff in general, is if you're not seeing the baseline of success, for me, that would be, it's not just a Blazek thing there. We've talked a lot about offensive line. Paul Haynes, cornerbacks. I realize that room has had a lot of pieces shuffled around in it. This isn't acceptable. I realize you're playing, you haven't exactly played powerhouse passing offenses so far. Alabama, you get a pass for. It wasn't as competitive as it should have been, but I would take that one out and I wouldn't hold that against you. Absolutely going to for Maryland. You had multiple pass breakdowns or pass defense breakdowns in that game that were huge problems for us.
Massive. Yep. I agree. And listen, as much credit as it gave Whitlow for a part of your job as a coach is to help bring talent in, help retain talent. You got to apply the same logic to Paul Haynes. They lost a lot of pieces in that room. So shuffling pieces around, that's part of your job as a coach. And yeah, it hasn't been competitive enough. We saw it against Middle Tennessee State. We gave up 3 or 4 deep shots against them.
Rico was bad in that game too.
It hasn't been nearly good enough. And I actually think the pass rush has been not great, but it's been better this year. But the secondary hasn't held up at all. Yeah,
I would agree with that completely. If the secondary was solid, I think the pass rush numbers would look significantly better. This is the one game this is the one time where I will say that I look at it and the secondary is just not helping out. Like, I do think, in my perspective, if you're really good at looking at the, where does sacks come from? It's from having studs on your front 7. Mm-hmm. Now, there's also a level of part of that production comes from just coverage. Like, if you're capable of holding on to guys for 3 seconds, 4 seconds, you're probably going to have some guys get home. I think that there's enough pass rush in this group that they should at least be competent and functional. We have not seen enough help on the back end to take away the quick completions to allow those guys to work.
The Zachman injury is a big deal too.
It is.
I know we're talking corners. Zachman is a really veteran steadying presence in that secondary. I don't know if we've talked enough about his injury and some of the issues it caused. I don't think that deep shot against Maryland happens if Zachman's in there. Now, it shouldn't happen if Zachman's not in there, right? You should still not give that up against Maryland. But the Zachman injury is a big deal to this defense too. Now that also, again, I'm kind of getting circular here. It's also on the coaches to have a backup that can go in there and not, crap the bed against Maryland. So
agreed.
A little bit of both on that one.
So we're going to move on now to the administrative side. I think that this is an underlying massive issue within the university that, listen, we're not terrible, but if we want to get to where everyone wants to see Wisconsin get back to, there has to be steps. and we're standing in our own way right now for a lot of it. And Wisconsin has to make some decisions here about what they truly want to be from an athletic department in the new era. Because anyone who's watched any of the SEC, what you will notice is not necessarily that they have more resources, but they are more bought into doing what it takes to try and make things work at that level compared to what Wisconsin is. Wisconsin has it. There's almost an arrogance associated with we can do this without having to just go all in. Like we don't need to open the purse strings to that level if we want to be competitive. We're Wisconsin. And I think that needs to go. Like we've got to find a way to get people to understand. And the first question I have on that is simply, does the university understand the current climate of college sports? Do you feel like they do? Do you feel like they truly understand what field they're playing on?
That's a really good question. And you could probably ask, honestly, 5 people connected in different ways, and you get 5 different answers. If I'm going to be completely honest, This is an administration that went out and hired Luke Fickell, spent big money on one of the hottest coaches. When, if we're thinking traditional Wisconsin, Jim Leonard would have made more sense. That's a Wisconsin guy, a good old boy, right? Would have cost less money. They went out and took a big swing on Luke Fickell. They're spending massively on a new practice facility, right? So I'm definitely not going to sit here and say they absolutely don't, because some of the investments on paper they show you shows that they do. And I think Mookin, the chancellor, Mookin, I probably mispronounced it. She legitimately, from people I've talked to, understands the importance of sports. I think there is a good balance from the chancellor understanding. Now, I also think, to your point, there is a very real part of Wisconsin that says we've always been fine without having to keep up with the Joneses and spend as much as others. So why are we doing that? And that part does need to evolve. I don't think it's going to be easy to evolve until you see some actual results, though, because right now we've spent a lot of money. We have spent quite a bit of money on this roster. We're not Ohio State, but we spend a decent amount. We do. And it's really easy for a donor to say, well, what the hell am I getting with my money? Why would I give you guys more money if this is the result of the money we've spent? Because I can tell you this, we spent enough money to beat Maryland at home. I promise you guys that.
Yeah, I think the way I look at it is from that perspective do you have people that truly understand how to best use that money and how do you attack it? And I know there's been some talk about a potential GM for football. I don't disagree with that, because I think you need somebody who understands what it's like running an organization like this and running it correctly. And I want to give them carte blanche and say, like, if you have somebody that has former NFL experience or whatever, or somebody who has some like high level college football experience, I don't want somebody that's got training wheels. I want somebody that understands we're doing this in a competitive landscape of how do I do this and how do I make my team the most competitive it can be. You need somebody that truly understands how those dollars are best invested at this level. And maybe that's part of the issue. Maybe we don't truly understand how you take that money that you do have and apply it. And that's where we're making some of our mistakes.
Yeah, I think a GM type, again, I thought that's what Marcus Sedbury was supposed to be. So it's like confusing sometimes with Wisconsin.
He's like he's GM of personnel. Like he's the guy who's in charge of free agency.
Yeah, it seems like, though, that should be someone who does some of what you're describing. But if you need more there, I'm all about adding all the pieces to the administration to make this better. For a couple of years, I've talked about, I think they get money in and then they overspend at one spot. I talked about it this offseason. I thought you need to bring in more offensive linemen, at least one more. I talked about it the year before when they brought in a bunch of linebackers to the point where one linebacker that they brought in left because he brought in too many guys. You remember that? We don't even remember that guy's name. He was on the roster for like 2 weeks. So I do think they need somebody to kind of, at the top level, balance this out a little bit and say, okay, we need somebody to help understand the larger picture of the roster, which also includes, if we bring in player X, what does that do to the younger guys on the roster? Are they going to maybe leave then? We need somebody there to help manage those resources in a better way for Wisconsin.
So what I would like to see too, and I don't want this guy associated with Fickell and his staff at all. If you do hire a GM, I want somebody brought in as an actual scout that self-scouts and watches our team and has no affiliation directly with the staff, but his job is simply to just evaluate. What do we have? Where are the shortcomings? And work with that, with the GM directly and say, hey, I'm watching practice day to day. This is where I'm seeing the problems with this roster. And I don't want anyone who's invested in this roster like the coaching staff's going to be, where maybe they want to kind of, wash over some of the limitations. I want somebody who's going to basically self-scout year round and just look at it and be like, all right, let's be honest with ourselves. Where are the areas that this isn't working? And truly attack that. And that can be as simple as maybe he's also scouting the coaching staff and looking at it and being like, hey, this guy just doesn't seem to be getting the results from that position group. Like there's more talent there than what we're seeing in terms of development.
I like the idea of that. In theory, I don't know how it would work. I feel like that would cause a lot of divisiveness in the football program. And I don't know if you want that. Like I like the idea of it though. I like where your head is at. But I think here's where I'm at. You need to trust your head coach that you pay. What's Fickell getting paid right now? $7 million? I don't know.
Somewhere in the 7.5 range.
Him to be able to self-scout himself. And if he's not capable of doing that, he needs to go.
Well, my point is more they're going to be obviously focused on other things. Whereas when you have somebody that's just strictly doing this job, their one goal is to simply look at, like, they don't have all the noise in the way when they're doing it. It's simply, this is what I'm seeing. These are my notes. Do with it what you will. And that's what I want. Like, I know Fickell and them are going to self-scout probably in the bye week. They probably did this bye week. Took a look at it and said, where are our shortcomings and what do we need to get better at during this time? But I want somebody who's doing that year round where they look at it and be like, all right, this is a massive problem. We need to find something like going into this during the course of the season. Where are the areas that if this isn't addressed, we're gonna be in a real bind going into next year. Like I think somebody doing this job right now would be looking at it and going, all right, offensive line, defensive secondary, whatever. They'd be looking at it and they would be looking at it from the perspective of, is this a personnel issue? Is this a coaching issue? Is this whatever? But I think you need to have somebody who is not biased. Like it needs to be as generic and objective as you can possibly be so that you can maximize what you're doing. And I realize that's not going to be easy. Like you can't, this isn't forming a fantasy team in order to put it together because chemistry matters with some of this stuff. But I also think you need to look at it and be real with yourself about where are our shortcomings.
Yeah, I mean, I totally hear that. It just feels like that's what your staff should be doing, right? Like, and if they're not doing that, then they got to go. I totally hear what you're saying. And I like the idea of somebody that's disconnected a little bit, but to me, it reminds me of like a Russian submarine that goes out with the political officer. And his job is to like spy on the captain of the Russian boat. And each other. They hate each other. It doesn't work. They kill each other and the submarine sinks. Like, I think you need alignment, right? And if you don't have that, like if your staff isn't able to do that, then I just say it again, like they got to go if they can't do that, because that should be a part of your staff somewhere. And maybe it's not Fickell, maybe it's Thompson who does a lot of their portal scouting, or maybe they bring someone else in under their staff, but they got to find a way to work together on that. And I mean, if they can't do that, if you can't find the holes in your roster and what's broken, then again, like you shouldn't have this job. I
mean, just being honest, for 3 years, we really haven't.
Yeah, that's fair. 100%.
And you could say, like, Ryan and I have watched these classes come in. There's talent that they've brought in. Like, there's legitimately guys who are capable of being high-level college players that aren't there. Well, some of it, I mean, 25 class, obviously, they get a wash. Like, they get a pass. I don't expect anything from true freshmen. Anything you get from them is just a bonus. But the redshirt freshman group, I've got to say to an extent right now, looking at them, I'm a little concerned with the development that I've seen. Like some guys are playing, but they're not necessarily playing well. I will say one player who I'll give some, and I've been on him from the beginning. I think Agard's played pretty well in the secondary. Mm-hmm. The secondary hasn't been great, but I thought for a guy who's very inexperienced, I haven't looked at him and said, like, he's a problem out there. He had a couple problems against Alabama, but then again, our entire secondary did.
Yeah. I think he's been fine, given he's a redshirt freshman corner. And corner is a hard spot to play. He had that really nice pick. Was it week 1 or week 2? I forget. Was it 2?
Against Mid-Tennessee State.
Yeah, like I think he's for a redshirt freshman, I think he's been totally fine. And this is the career trajectory of a guy who, by the time he's a redshirt junior, is a second-team All-Big Ten type guy, third-team All-Big Ten type guy. I think he's been really solid for a redshirt freshman. I got no issues with Agard. Quite frankly, I don't have a huge issue with Mandel, because you're talking about a guy who's spent time getting hurt and then been flipped positions. What is the reasonable expectation there? That's on the staff, right, for not having better pieces there.
Well, realistically, none of the young offensive linemen should be playing this year. Like, in a perfect world, they're starting next year and they're ready to go and just plug in. And you knew there were going to be growing pains, but we had figured it would be hit or miss versus just miss and then mid. Like we have not seen the ceilings where we haven't seen those plays where it's like suddenly you see a guy get a great block and you have a 15-yard gain followed by, the play where there's a negative play, running back gets hit in the backfield. It hasn't been like that. It's been basically all negative so far. And that you need to figure something out with that. And hopefully that's a lot of what happened over this last bye week. And you've now figured out some things and maybe gotten just more consistent. And that's what it's got to be. Like, guys really need to understand what their job is and effectively execute it. I don't care if we're getting 7-8 yard carries. I care if we can get 3 or 4. And it just needs to be positive rather than guys running into a wall. And if that's the case, those 3 or 4s will eventually, by the end of the season, start getting better.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's very fair.
All right. So diving into the next question. Do we have the right people in charge of from the administrative side?
Oh, so we're talking basically
we're talking like the athletic director, the people who are in charge at that level, above Luke Fickell, to understand what we're doing as a college program.
Yeah. So again, I've talked about Mnuchin a little bit. I think she's fine as a chancellor. She understands the importance of sports, and that's really all you ask for the chancellor. It sounds like we're having kind of a Chris McIntosh discussion then at that point.
Him and maybe the people surrounding him regarding, do they understand like what's going on within the current climate, and are they self-aware enough to evaluate themselves and say, I'm failing here, I need to get better, what I need to do to execute this better, to truly understand what the job entails and what's required in order to excel at this level?
I'm not sure.
I don't think it's just McIntosh with this. I think that it feels like that's one of the areas that I need to look at, and you need some really sharp people in charge.
Yeah, I think that the McIntosh thing is interesting, right? Because a lot of Badger fans are either out on him or frustrated with him. And he really got hired for the same reasons that now people wanted Jim Leonard to get hired, right? Mm-hmm. Wisconsin guy, understands the culture, hasn't really done this at this level. And it feels like people now want that version of a head coach for Wisconsin, but don't want that version of an athletic director for Wisconsin, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
If you look at McIntosh's tenure, volleyball was good before he got here. Women's hockey was good before he got here. He inherited Greg Gard, who's been really good. His first women's basketball hire, Marie Mosley, has been a train wreck. Now, I think Barry Alvarez is easy with that, but that was also Chris McIntosh. That was a disaster. It's not been great.
To their credit, it seems like they replaced them with somebody who's at least can stabilize that program.
I like Coach P, for sure. I like her. But it hasn't been great. Like, if you look at the totality of it, and now the program is being sued by some players on the former women's basketball program, which is, people can talk about women's basketball, maybe not as important, but listen, that's not good headlines. That's not good PR, no matter how you want to slice it. So I don't know if McIntosh, to your question, I'm not answering very well. To round it back to your question, does he have the self-awareness? I'm not sure, because he's never been in this role, and he's also almost inextricably tied to Luke Fickell because that was his hire. And that worries me a little bit.
Yeah, and I guess the way I want to look at this is, do those problems disappear if the head coach is a hit? Like, if you hit on somebody like Indiana, do I think that they're running things at like an incredible level, or do I think they just have a really good head coach? Because I think they have a really good head coach. I don't know if the program, like from an administrative standpoint, is exceptional or not, but Cignetti knows what he's doing, and that's covering up potentially any other issues that are there.
Would you be confident in Chris McIntosh hiring the next football coach? Because that's really the question.
I don't know. It would be the answer that I have. I've told you what my thoughts are on what you need to look for at that position. I don't want a retread. I don't want the next hot coordinator. I want somebody who is a proven winner and is going to bring a staff in with them. And that's what I want to see if you're going to try to figure this out. And I don't know if he's willing to do that, because I feel like he is attracted to some glitz rather than some, and I don't think we need that. Like right now, if you're going to change something, The hire has got to be somebody who can stabilize the program and get you back to 6-6 and looking competent. And then you can go up from there and figure out whether, where can we add to that? Well, right now, that's what you're looking for if you're hiring somebody, because that baseline has got to be good.
Let me ask you this. Is it almost a little unfair to Chris McIntosh, who was given this job without really experience running a program in another spot? Obviously, he tutored under Barry Alvarez. He knows Wisconsin. He knows the culture, but didn't have that experience. And then he went out and made the hire. Everybody, 95% of people, I won't say everybody, 95% of people were really excited.
If you're being objective, it's a 100%. Like you can't look at those two resumes and say that Leonard should have been hired over, because it's just not valid. Like, I get people can have their allegiances to Leonard. That's totally fine. But you cannot look at those two resumes and say that you would have picked Leonard over him unless you're just being a homer.
So why are we hating on McIntosh then? Is kind of the opposite side of this argument.
Because he fired Paul Christ, who was a well-liked coach, and people want to hold that against him.
But objectively, a lot of people were excited about this move when it happened. And now
I agree.
Certainly it hasn't worked out. And as the person who made that hire, you're going to bear the brunt of that. That just comes with the job. You have the big seat, you get the big criticism. That's fair. But did he do anything people in the moment really hated? I don't think so. So I don't know. I go back and forth on McIntosh. Again, I would have liked for him to have cut his teeth somewhere else. I remember talking about that at the time. I always get a little worried when a guy who doesn't have that experience somewhere else. It would have been the same with Jim Leonard taking his head coaching job. I like someone having that experience, but I don't know if I'm out on him.
Okay. And that's totally fair. I don't know what to expect from him if he's given another opportunity, which is what scares me, because it's like, I don't know what your criteria are for this. And there's a real risk in my mind that you overthink this, or you go for somebody who you think, because you think you need to make a splash and get his head in the right direction. I don't think you do. In fact, I think you can go cheaper with a staff just to find people who are good football people and say, this staff understands. Leipold went to Kansas. He wasn't going in there as a high, like this super name guy. He was just a really good football coach who had excelled at every place he went. And, you had an opportunity to get somebody in there who could set a standard of what was expected. And that program is night and day compared to where it was when Les Miles left. Kansas was a train wreck. It was the worst Power 4 program in the country. Now they were talk at one point, people saying that they thought they were going to potentially, be in the Big 12 title game. We'll see if that gets to that, but they're competitive in every game they play. And that's what I think you need. You need to get a football guy who understands. Cignetti is a football guy. Like, he's flashy because he's got attitude, but the dude understands football and winning. Like, he knows what he wants to see on the field. And you talked about Whitlow not suffering fools. That's Cignetti. Like, that guy does not put up with attitude and just not doing what you're told. He has an expectation of this is what I expect from you. Go out there and do it.
Yeah. No, he does. And that's, I mean, you need some of that. I don't know. It's tough because Luke Fickell had a bit of that reputation coming in too. As I remember reading about him as a wrestling coach and the competitiveness and how he's just a competitive, crazy person. I mean, I talked to someone who went to school with him. That was some of the vibe we got off. So it's just strange, man. It's strange it's honestly strange how poorly this has actually worked, right?
I have a thought on that. And tell me if you think this is wrong. I just don't think he believes in anything specifically as a coach, meaning like, this is my bread and butter. This is what I hang my hat on. He feels very much like a manager, CEO type who wants to give that authority to his coordinators. And I think that might be to a detriment. Like, it's good to be flexible, but you still need to have like your vision of what you want this to be. And I don't feel like there's a vision there with him. And that's part of the problem. Like, he doesn't know what he wants. Like, he vaguely kind of knows that he wants us to be able to run the football yet and pass, but it doesn't feel like he's attached to any specific scheme or anything like that. And we saw that with the defense. Like, he talked about how his time was at Cincinnati, where they kept jumping back to different schemes in terms of being able to figure out what would work best in the American Conference or Conference USA or whatever Cincinnati was in at the time. And I just look at that and I'm like, well, you have to have something that you believe in terms of like, this is how I think we can win. And I don't feel like there is truly something that we're locked into to say that here.
I think that's fair. That's actually a pretty good point. I would say that archetype can actually work. You can be a CEO type head coach, but then you have to make sure the hires you make are really on point. The coordinator hires, and the first one on the offense side was a friggin' disaster, right?
And you need them to stick around too. That's the other part of it.
You need to hit on them and you need to stick around. So you can be the CEO type coach. I think that's fine. But I mean, that's kind of what James Franklin is for better or worse. And he hires really good coordinators and they're usually really good. Now, they also lose to every tough team they play, but you can have success there. I think it's a good point that you have. But, dude, then you have to hit your hires. And he hasn't done that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And then finally, Ryan, I told you I was going to only keep you for a half hour, 45 minutes.
Okay.
We're just going to dive into players. And I think that this is actually the area that I put the least amount on them at this point. I think that they have been let down a little bit by everything. Like I think that legitimately I look at it, there's more talent on this team than what we're seeing on the field. And I think that is an area that you need to find a way to maximize what you have, so you at least know what you have and where your weaknesses are. Because I think that there are certainly areas, like I think there's legitimate offensive line talent on this team. I think next year, if you have somebody, if we figure things out there, that line is capable of being good next year. Mm-hmm. I think I really like some of the talent at corner for under Haynes. I have no clue whether they'll be developed enough to be ready to go, but I do like some of the talent that's in that room. We've talked about Kairos Gaines. We've talked about Jamari Washington, talked about Jameer Scott. Like there's guys that are bodies in that room who I think have talent that are capable of being good players. We need to see them get developed and prove that talent can win out.
This is a spot where I think maybe you and I disagree a little bit, which is fine. I think we've overrated some of our talent.
I don't think the ceiling is there.
Yeah,
which is I think where you and I would agree.
I think a guy like Joe Brunner, a lot of people expected him to be better, and he just hasn't played well. And that's not all on Grimes, Blase.
I agree with that.
He needs to play better. This is his period. I think we thought Ricardo Holman would just be better. Like some of this stuff is probably scheme stuff. Some of it is, dude, just cover your guy. Mm-hmm. I put a stat up the other day on my show, but it's wild. So 3 years ago in his breakout season, opponents completed 44% of passes thrown against him. 44. That's really good. This year they're completing 72% as a redshirt senior. Like that's insane.
He's getting abused.
You would have the same success if you put me out there. It's unbelievable how bad he's been. So some of this is his players. Ricardo's got to play better. Like Brunner's got to play better. Jaden Ballard has to play better. So I think we overestimated our talent overall is where I'm coming back to.
And I don't disagree with that to a point. Mine was more like, I think that there's enough talent for 6-6 on this roster. I'm not talking about like 8-4, 9-3, but there's enough to at least be competent and competitive. And we're not seeing that right now. And that to me speaks more to coaching than it does to anything that we're seeing from the players, because I don't see a team playing fast and loose. I see a team that's thinking a lot. I see a team that doesn't really understand what they're trying to do. And it shows whenever they try to execute.
I think that's fair. And I'll also say, to your point, I think this is also fair to say there's enough talent on this team to not be beaten 27-10 to Maryland. There is more talent on this team than that. And I think that's incredibly fair to point out. Like, this is not New Mexico several years ago when they were getting beat 70-0 against everybody. Like, they are better than this. While simultaneously, I think we overestimated their actual ability level. So I think that both those things are in play.
Badger and Bournemouth, this is the one area that I think that you and I both agree on. You've got to figure out the quarterback position. And that I mean that from the standpoint of it. I'm not even talking just the portal. You've got to consistently hit. And it's possible that Carter Smith is one of those guys. It's possible that so is Hopkins. We need to make sure that we have the people in place that can develop those two guys so that they are capable of coming in and being a net plus. I will say this, and I see from Brad Klippel, put Carter Smith in. I want absolutely nothing to do with him touching the field with what the train wreck that we're seeing out there right now. This is how you destroy a quarterback. They are not ready to have him out there yet. Like, they're having a good quarterback with how bad we are at everything else right now isn't going to fix much. You'll probably get a little bit more meaningless yards. You might score a few extra points per game, but I don't think it substantially changes our outlook in terms of what we've seen so far. There's too many areas that need to be corrected in order to get this thing running smoother. And a lot of it is coaching right now. Like, you've got to have some things that you clean up and just do correctly and have guys execute. And they don't have to be perfect. Like, even the run game, there's no reason that this team can't be 150 yard per game run game with the talent that we have. And we're not showing that right now.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think it's a bad idea to put a true freshman in who didn't play a ton last year, even in high school, or throw the ball out because he was injured.
Yep.
It's important to remember Carter Smith is probably even a little further behind the developmental curve than a lot of high school players that come in here because he was hurt a lot of senior year and wasn't able to throw the ball. This offensive line is not conducive, especially with the schedule coming up. You're just going to get his brains beat in.
Mm-hmm.
I listen, some of this is just really crappy luck too. We talked about it a bunch. I don't need to belabor it. They starting quarterbacks have gotten hurt every year. So that's part of it. But they've also misevaluated or misidentified. You think of a Mabry Mentoyer. You think of Nick Evers, who came in, Braden Locke, who came in. So they missed on their share of quarterbacks where Landon Locke came in and then left like a thief in the night, never even saw him. So they've misidentified that spot. And I hope Badger fans are ready for another portal guy next year because they're going to go back. I don't know what to tell you guys. They're not going to go into next year with Carter Smith as the only guy in that room.
Yeah, I think you need to legitimately look at somebody that's got multiple years, and you need to tell Carter, hey, I'm going to let you compete for it, but we need to stabilize this position and have people that can give us more than one run a year because this isn't working. Right now, if there was ever a time where you look for somebody who you can build with, it's the time to do it. Getting a 1-year rental is how you cap off a team. It is not how you build a team. And Illinois is benefiting from that right now. They brought in their guy as a redshirt freshman.
Altmaier,
yeah, he's like a redshirt freshman or something like that. He started as a redshirt sophomore. So he left the year before he transferred out was a redshirt freshman. Came in and was a redshirt sophomore, I believe, and they've had 3 years of him starting now. And we would kill for that here.
Yeah, it must be nice. I mean, you could do that. So they did that with Daniel O'Neill to some degree, bringing a guy with multiple years. The problem is the offensive line. Like, quarterbacks can't succeed if the offensive line is what it is.
I don't know why we have to consistently take somebody who's missing like a skill level, and it's the most important skill, which is Ryan. That's a part of it, yes, but I'm not looking for finished product. I'm looking for somebody who has raw tools. Like, I'll take somebody who's not a finished product if they have some arm strength and they have some things, and you have to do the job teaching them the mental aspect, because I don't think that any of these guys, what they're going to be mentally until you get them out on the field. So if a guy has a big arm in high school and you think you can develop him, then go ahead and try to figure out if you can. Because we see all the time guys who are better athletes and have better arms than what we get here at Wisconsin. For teams that are worse than Wisconsin have less money. And for whatever reason, they're just better at evaluating it.
Well, I think at the high school rank, they've kind of done that to some degree, though. Like, Mabry had physical tools. Hopkins does. Carter Smith does. I mean, I think all those guys physically have tools. So I actually think at the high school rank, they've done that.
Yeah.
Even in the portal, Mordecai actually has physical tools.
He does. They put him in a terrible ecosystem, but yeah.
It was year one of Longo, right? So it didn't work. But he's that type of guy who can come in, he can spin the ball, he can run. Braden Locke, not so much. To be perfectly fair, not so much.
That's a fair criticism. Listen, the reality of it is that from a player standpoint, you have the players you probably need to hit the baseline I talked about. From there, it's up to the coaching staff to figure out where they can supplement that and get it to better beyond that. Indiana regrouped and rebuilt well. And some of that is because they played well enough in the first year that the donors decided that they were going to pay up. Well, Wisconsin's got to, there's a level of, I'm sure, angst within the donor base for Wisconsin right now that's like, until I know that my money's in good hands, I don't want to pony up because I'm not seeing results. I'm not seeing return on investment at all. And all I want to see is my team look good, and it's not showing up that way.
No, 100%. I mean, if you're a donor and you give money and this is what you're seeing on the field, it's not going to encourage you to give more. An analogy I used was like if a guy goes into credit card debt because he's spending his money poorly and then he goes and asks his parents for more money, they're going to be like, well, what happened to the money we gave you? What's the end result? He's like, well, I'm into a lot of debt and everything sucks. Okay, we're not going to give you more money then, bro. Like you need to go out and win and prove that you can do it. So I do think there's an element of that. If you win and you generate excitement, money will come. It will flow here. But
people want to see you get over the top.
Mm-hmm.
But all right, we're gonna go ahead and call it there. Thank you, Ryan, for stopping by and chopping this up with me for a little bit. For anyone that's listening or watching us on X or on YouTube, if you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe. Other than that, till next time, we'll see you guys. 3 big things this week for Michigan, and you guys enjoy the rest of your Sunday watching some football. Maybe we'll get a Packers victory and we'll feel better about it. Maybe we'll get a Brewers victory to at least end the season on a high note before we head into the playoffs. But see you guys later. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoy the show, subscribe to our YouTube channel at The Bucky Report or The Bucky Report Podcast from wherever you get your content. Until next time, on Wisconsin!